Hey guys, Zine here, and I'm on a copy of the TrollCraft server, and I wanted to answer some of your questions regarding facades and how I did the wiring in Jordan and Crainer's bases that they've rebuilt, and just how that works. So I wanted to take a minute and show you how that works. There's actually two different types of facades. There's the Applied Energistics facades and the EnderIO facades, as well as cables for the ME system itself. So we want to kind of show what the differences are between those two, when to use one, when to use the other, and then we can go into, if we have time, some more Applied Energistics advanced items as well. So first off, as you guys saw when Jordan was giving a tour of his base, that he has these wires that are running through his base when he's holding the crescent hammer, or really it's any wrench or cable as well. Like here I'm holding the cable and you can see it, but a regular just item doesn't show them. You have the facades that are up, and these are EnderIO facades. They take an entire block, and as you can see, you can actually place both multiple types of wiring inside the facades at the same time. And so that's one of the major benefits of EnderIO facades, is that they can handle multiple types of cable. I've seen, we've got the power, we've got ME. I know that there's a EnderIO redstone cable, either in EnderIO itself or in an add-on. But it really allows you a lot more flexibility, because you can just cram all those wires into the same block and run them along, and then ultimately have them be hidden. So EnderIO facades are made using a painting machine. Let's go ahead and kind of set these up. So right here, I want to just add a little workstation, a little work area. I've got my dense ME conduit coming off of the controller, and then I've got my power right here. So if I bring these down, that just like normal, nothing particularly advanced here. The ME conduit is going to be my replacement for Applied Energistics. It's an EnderIO version of it, but it's compatible, so that's what's happening there. And then we have our power cable as well. Let's get a copy of that right there, and we can just click them on, place it in the same block, and you can see they just automatically stack together. Now, obviously, we don't have the facades in here yet, but that's kind of the next step. To make a facade, you end up getting an EnderIO painting machine. So it's right here, and I'm not going to get into what you need to do to craft it. It's nothing terribly expensive or anything like that, but you get yourself a painting machine, and first off, get that placed down. It does need power, which we'll have because we have the power line there, so that should be filling up just fine, no problem. And then this takes two different blocks. It takes a block that you want it to look like, and then a blank facade called just conduit facade not painted. Right, so these again aren't terribly expensive. You make conduit binder, which is made by making the binder composite, which is just clay, gravel, and sand. So clay, gravel, and sand, and you're good to go. You get a couple of these, and then you open up the painting machine and add in both the painting facades themselves and then the block that you want to be painted. So here, Jordan's floor is made of dark oak, the 5.5 ID. If I add that in, then it's going to take one and start crafting it out, and it doesn't actually use the item that you're building, that you're using as the painting, the model. It only takes the conduit facade, so it doesn't cost you anything on the painting side, only to make the blocks themselves, if that makes any sense. So now we have a couple conduit facades. Simple enough. You just take them, find a kind of a blank spot. I mean, placement can be a little bit tricky because you're talking kind of through, but at the same time, it pretty much just works like, placing a block, and it just ignores those cables that are there, and that's how you go about it. So you can place the cables down and take care of it, but if you wanted to, you also have the option of placing the cable through in an already existing facade. So it doesn't matter whether you place the cables first or whether you place the facade first. You can you can add the other in at either point. So that makes that pretty simple. One of the kind of interesting things, and occasionally it's handy, occasionally it's a gotcha, is when you're looking through the facade and it's in this transparent mode, it's basically like the facade's not there for interaction purposes. So, I'm holding a wrench, and I could be holding, anything that's turns the facade transparent. and when I break a block through, it actually goes through the transparent block and goes down to the next one. So that's something that can be kind of interesting, kind of handy, but also a little bit of a gotcha. So you know, when you're trying to place a block inside a facade, if you were in this situation, you could easily place it below rather than where you wanted it. So you just got to kind of keep that in mind, that that can happen, and the blocks aren't, they basically become like air when they're transparent. So one of the behaviors of EnderIO cables is that you can use the hammer to adjust whether they connect when you're trying to keep data channels separate. Like say right here, you wanted to have two different offshoots here. You can just click on the block and make it go away, and now this is a separate section. It's not connecting, and it's pretty simple to control where they do or don't connect. And you know, sometimes it's about, you have to find the right corner of the cable, but once you find it, then no problem, you can disconnect them, you can reconnect them, and it's pretty simple. That's why I like to carry the crescent hammer. The crescent hammer, you know, there's a lot of different tools out there that do the hammer, or not so much the hammer, but the wrench tools, and that's what the crescent hammer is, a wrench tool. But it's one of the ones that I prefer because it doesn't have durability, and I've never really understood the wrench has durability. I understand, you know, that things wear out and that sort of thing, but just in game, in the process, I don't particularly like dealing with having to remake and worry about whether my wrench is going to cover it or not. So I like the crescent hammer. It's cheap, and it just gets you straight to work, and it's not really something that I want to sit there and play around with. So I like the fact that I can just, you know, put it in and go. So we can add these facades here, and now all of this wiring is hidden, and you can just place machines however you want. In terms of using machines and conduits that are in facades, they act exactly as if there wasn't a conduit at all. So if you want to get a machine hooked into it, you just place it on top. If you pull out your hammer, you can see it will have automatically connected right there, and we can take a look inside and see that RF is coming in. So it really doesn't matter whether or not there is a facade there or not. It just treats it exactly like it wasn't. So, and then if you want to remove a facade, the way that you do that is you actually make sure that you can see it, and then you can just break it, or you know, if you're not in creative, then you can mine it out, and it'll give it back to you as an item, and leaves the cables in place. So making sure, if you want to interact with the facades themselves, they can't be transparent. Again, it turns them to air basically when you're working with them, and you can see through them. So let's put that back. So at any rate, painting machine, fairly simple, not expensive. The making the blank conduit facades, still not difficult, and then you just need to have your base item that it's going to look like and add it in, and it should crank it out. Not a big deal, not hard to work with at all, and very straightforward for those. Now the other facade item that is a little bit separate is the Applied Energistics version of facades, and I've shown those before. I showed those in when I demoed channels with Crainer's system, but these are the ones that you actually build using cable anchors inside of a crafting table. You put the base item you want inside the crafting section, and so say we wanted brown stained clay facades, and then you just add 4 cable anchors around it, and that'll give you 4 facades that you can then work with. So that's pretty simple and straightforward stuff, nothing too difficult to create there. And where you would want those is, say that you have your EnderIO ME cables coming through here. Now, a lot of the Applied Energistics items, while the EnderIO conduits can carry channels, the items won't necessarily connect to them. So that's a bit of a problem. You need the items, obviously, to be able to interact and work. Otherwise, they're not a whole lot of point. So in general, when you want to move and actually apply an Applied Energistics item, then you need to move to regular Applied Energistics cables. Now, they will connect just fine. You can see that there's an actual interface there. So, I mean, the EnderIO ME cables aren't identical, but they do carry the channels just fine. So we can hook that up there, and then we can add a crafting terminal. But because we are on an original cable, we're not in a EnderIO conduit, we can't add a facade onto it. That would be that doesn't work for you. Here I'm trying to right click and it's just not working. So this is where you would drop back to the old fallback of using the Applied Energistics facades, and you, as we've mentioned, they just cover one side. You can use the hammer and sneak right click to remove them. So cover one side, and that will only it only covers the one side. Where the facade is an entire block, where the EnderIO facades are an entire block, the applied Energistics facades are just a single side within that block. So we can come through, shift so that we don't open that, and then place that, and now we've hidden that. So that's using the two different facades to hide your cables, using the EnderIO cables as channel carriers, and also adding power in all in the same block. One thing that Jordan talked about in his video that you need to kind of be careful of is it is really handy that they will show you when you hover over them with Wayla, you can see 4 of 32 channels up at that top section there. You do need to be careful where you do that. It will give you the wrong idea because that's showing you 4 of 32 in that particular block or section. So don't let that get ahead of you in terms of what you're seeing. So the reason it's getting 4 is I've got an export bus there, a import bus there, a level emitter, and then another export bus. So 4 items there. But if we come over and we look over on this section, now we're at 8, and that's because there's more items in there. So when you're checking your data channels, when you're working with them, you really want to make sure at the very least you're at the end of a segment. You don't want to look in the middle of your items. So if we come down here, we can see there's actually 14 devices down on that end that are taking channels. So you got to be careful of where you look to look at those numbers if you're feeling like you're maxing your data channels out, because if you look in the wrong spot, then you end up seeing the wrong thing, and you can pull your hair out trying to figure out where exactly that went wrong. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Moving on to some of the applied energistics stuff and what we wanted to do there. I know that Jordan posted, or in his video, he talked about the level emitter and how that worked. And then he gave an example of it working. And then it didn't work in the example because things weren't configured right. So let's kind of talk through that a little bit. So what Jordan demoed was that the level emitter is here, and it's supposed to leave 1,000 cobble in his system. And if there's anything over 1,000 cobble, then it's going to push it into the crafter. Now, when he did that, most everything worked right, except it didn't, right? So we have his crafter here, and we want to get a couple over 1,000 cobble, so 729 times 2, that's 14, carry the 1, divide by 3, that should be enough, right? So the idea of what we're trying to do is to only have it keep 1,000 cobble inside of his system, and anything else it should get rid of. So you have the, and this is useful for keeping, like, I mean, in my opinion, like dirt, cobble, all of those things that you grab blocks of, you grab a stack of to be able to build or whatever, you want to still have some on hand, but you don't want it cluttering up all of your drives and everything. So you want to compress all the extra, right? And that's where kind of that idea is. So you would, first thing you set up is where you're going to have your base export to the machine. So again, we have the export bus. It's configured to put cobblestone in. And everything else being equal, as soon as you hook this up to the ME system, that will just start exporting cobble without any questions asked. It's not going to stop. It will go until there's no more cobble left. That's a base export bus at its minimum. Well, the first thing that we need to add to have this work is a redstone card. So what the redstone card does is it adds this control over on this side, and it allows you to define whether or not you want the export bus to be active with a signal, whether you want it always active once per pulse, and are active without a signal. So basically just your typical, do you want it to require a signal to activate, or do you want it to only activate when it receives a signal? Those are really the two modes that I use, the active with pulse and that sort of thing. I don't get into that much. They have very specific niche purposes, but for this sort of use, you either want it active with signal or active without. So again, that adds that control so that we have over the export bus. So where Jordan went wrong is he didn't look inside his export bus and look and make sure that the redstone card was configured correctly, and he had it set to always active. So as long as always active is on, it's as if the redstone card wasn't even there. It's one of those kind of silly things where if you're always active, then you don't even need the redstone card because it's not going to pay attention anyway. So we want it to require a signal in order to be active. So he had a couple hundred cobble in his system. Now that I've set that over, it should have drained out. And yeah, he only has this compressed cobblestone here. He doesn't have any active cobble anymore. So we wanted, again, to set that to active with signal so that it requires that the level emitter goes off. The level emitter, the way that works is it looks in the ME system, and based on the conditions you give it, either generates a signal or doesn't. So you can tell that it's currently not generating a signal right now because this is off. When it is generating a signal, that'll light up, and so it's pretty easy to see what's going on there. In fact, as you can see, now that I've removed the cobble from this spot, it actually will turn on and just by default be sending the signal. So you can see that now it's bright, it's sending a signal. This would actually be running if there was cobblestone to be draining, because the export bus is receiving a redstone signal. It's configured so that when it receives that signal, it turns on, so all the cobble would be going away. So when you're configuring these things, you need to be a little bit careful. Typically what I do is I set up the export bus, set up the redstone card, and then add the item I'm going to export as the very last. So the level emitter is first, then I do the export bus and its redstone card, and then I add the item that I actually want to do exporting of, and that way I make sure that it's not running when I don't expect it to, right? So we're going to open this up, and again, we wanted to pay attention to cobble. This is telling the level emitter that cobble is the block to be looking at. So now it's comparing this number of this item against what is in your ME system, and it's going to say, all right, it's supposed to be at 1,000, and it's cobblestone. So on this side right here with the redstone mode, that's how you tell it what to do. Emit when levels are above or equal to the limit. So it's saying if the number of cobblestone is above or equal 1,000, then turn on. So you can also set that to emit when levels are below limit, and that again would be when there are less than 1,000 of this item of cobblestone, then turn on. That's really handy for like keeping glass on hand. That's something. So I set up a level emitter with an export bus hooked into a redstone furnace, and I set it up with that it's exporting glass, and then I have a level emitter there that's looking to see whether or not I have, say, 200 glass in my system. If I use some, then it says, oh, there's less now. It turns on, it starts exporting sand to the redstone furnace, which then smelts it to glass and puts it back into my ME system, and now I have automatically moved that back up to 200 or approximately, and that way I always have some glass on hand. So you can set it to either kick off when it is above that limit or below. In this case, we want it to be above. So again, emit when levels are above or equal to the limit of 1,000 for the item cobblestone, and that's a condition that isn't true, so the redstone signal is off. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for. I've got a couple of triple compressed cobblestone here. If I take them and put them into the system, let's search to cobble, and create my double, and then I go through and create my compressed, add that in, and then finally take all of the compressed, and let's make some regular cobble. Boop, 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 boop. Throw that in, add. My inventory is a little bit messy here. Let's just clear some of this out, no problem. And give me, let's just clear all of it out. Heck, let's go ham. All right, give me all of the cobble. I want all of the cobble, and now this should be enough to set it over the 1,000. And once it does, we should be able to clearly see that it starts exporting and that the emitter is turned on. So it's exporting, and now it is sending the cobble in. You see it moving there on those pulses. So the cobble should be going down, and yeah, we were at 2,000, now we're at 1,700. Sometimes, I mean, with these systems, it can take it a second to start ticking. You do have to be just slightly patient, just long enough to make you worried that things aren't working, and then it'll start going off. So it should get to around 1,000 or below, just below 1,000, and then stop. And we should be able to see this the level emitter turn off once that condition hits, and that'll tell us, all right, that this is no longer working. There it goes, and we should be just under 1,000 cobble in the system 955. If you wanted to hit exact numbers, then you can't use acceleration cards. The acceleration cards increase the number of items that it moves per tick, and so you end up being an approximation, not exactly. But I mean, again, you just leave a little bit of fudge room, and it's fine. And that's basically how that works. We had the level emitter watching the amount of cobble system in the ME system. We had the export bus configured, an important step to pay attention to that signal with the redstone card over here. And then once the signal turned off, the export bus turned off, and we're no longer compressing cobble. So that's level emitters. And again, they're very handy for keeping a certain amount of an item like dirt, cobble, or other building blocks that you would normally compress. Even I use them and expand them out to use say iron, keep 100 ingots on hand, but compress the rest into blocks, or coal, or any of those things that have their compressed version, and you want to maximize the amount of space that you retain, your space efficiency, but yet you still want to keep those on hand so that you can do your building. That's where the level emitter really becomes really powerful for you and can help out a lot. So guys, I'm going to end that here. I know that we still have a lot more in Applied Energistics Advanced to talk about, but it is nearly the holidays. I've got to get down to my family. I hope you guys all have a great holiday, and that this helped you at least with the wiring and the level emitter system, and we'll talk a little bit more when I get back, and I'm able to make some more videos for you guys. But until then, make sure that you're following the 3 main principles of TrollCraft. That's SSundee, Crainer, and CaptainSparklez. Follow Kehaan, and hell, follow me while you're at it. Why not? And I appreciate you guys for coming out. Have a nice day.